All right, guys, today we are talking about new faces in new places. Part one. That's right. I said part one. We're going to have many parts of this, but today we are talking about quarterbacks, tight ends, where they were, where they're heading to, and all the fantasy implication in between. Guys, do not forget to subscribe, follow, like, and share all the content on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and that of X. Get ready. We're diving in.
All right. Welcome to the show. This is the Frankly Fantasy Football Podcast. We are your hosts, Frankie and Johnny. Welcome in, Frankie. We've got new faces, new places, part one, baby.
That's right, John. Man, am I excited, dude. We're almost in August. We're almost in training camp. We're telling people where new people are, where old people are, new place. Man, this is a good time of the year, baby.
Hey, these episodes are important, man. The off season and the free agency for the NFL is
Crazy.
bananas. Every year it gets more and more and more. This year we couldn't even believe it, guys. There's a couple of quarterbacks, couple of tight ends we're going to talk about. Wait until you see the running backs and receiver episodes. There are so many that we have to do multiple episodes for running backs. We have to do multiple episodes for receivers, because there's just too much. And so many of these guys are going to be fantasy relevant to your team. It's going to be great content. So stay tuned, guys. It's going to be wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Please don't forget, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X. And I know you all listen on Spotify and on Google and Apple Podcasts. Please, guys, this year of all years, you must start watching on YouTube. We've got good videos and films and highlights, great images and stats we're going to be putting up, and some
shorts.
funny shit as well. Some good shorts as well. Yeah, Frankie's killing it as the social media marketing manager, Frank. Really nice job.
Thanks, John.
All right, so let's get to it, guys. Let's see what we've got going on today. New faces, new places. These are guys that are on new teams this year, and we're going to start with quarterbacks right now. All right, Frankie, let's get right into it here. We're going to start with Kirk Cousins, the man, the guy with the shirt off, the guy with the chains, the nerdiest badass you've ever seen in your life, man. All right, so Kirk Cousins now, all right, was on the Vikings last year with Minnesota. This year, he's coming to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, we didn't get a full season of Kirk Cousins last year. He only played 8 games after an Achilles tear. Very scary injury. So we're going to be talking about that and how good we feel about that, or if it gives us a little hesitation with Kirk Cousins. But last year, only playing 8 games, he finished as the QB 24. This year with the Falcons, he is currently the QB 18 off the board, 112 ADP. Frankie, talk to me about Kirk Cousins and what we're going to be doing with this guy.
John, I hope Kirk Cousins' first purchase is going to be some grills here, man. I want him to look frosty. I want to see the chains rocking out in ATL, baby. You know why? Because he signed a 4-year, $180 million deal with $100 guaranteed, baby, and playing in that of Atlanta. Paid, John. Make it rain, baby. John, you mentioned it. Kirk Cousins only played for 8 games last year. But what was incredible about Kirk Cousins was he was actually on pace to not only lead the league in passing yards, but he was also on pace to lead the league in touchdown to interception ratio. John, he threw for 2,300 yards. It was actually 2,331 yards last year. 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in 8 games. A really good comparison here is that against that of Desmond Ritter, right? When we look at, okay, well, what did Kirk Cousins do in the 8 games that he had in Minnesota versus what Desmond Ritter, right, the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons last year did? Desmond Ritter in 15 games, John, had a little over 2,800 passing yards, 12 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions with a passer rating of 83.4. Again, I mentioned Kirk Cousins with the stats that he had, but he had a passer rating of 103.8. Now, again, they're different players. Kirk Cousins has more experience in the NFL. But what this is telling me, man, is that ATL got their QB. They're ready to rock and roll. And for me, man, what I see happening here in the future is this is absolutely going to look to skyrocket the other players on the Atlanta team in comparison to what we've seen last year. So when we look at, okay, well, what happened within the situation over at Minnesota, John? Kirk Cousins, what he did really well last year was he got JJ involved early and often. Jordan Addison was a superstar while that of Kirk Cousins there, but nobody talks about the implications of that of TJ Hawkinson. Kirk Cousins made TJ Hawkinson during that 8 games go crazy. And yes, TJ Hawkinson became the cozy blanket after that for a lot of the other players like that of Josh Dobbs, Jaron Hall, right? Some of these other cats that were coming in and playing at quarterback, but it wasn't to the Kirk Cousins level. So John, let's transition into that of he's on ATL now, right? So what do we got looking here? For me, man, I think that this is going to elevate Bijan above anything that we have seen last year. Outside of Arthur Smith being gone in Atlanta, you bring in Raheem Morris, right? Absolutely badass coach. I loved that hire. And now you have Bijan Robinson, who they came out and said is going to be used like CMC. Check downs all the way to that from Kirk Cousins to that of Bijan. And then you look at that of Drake London, man. And I think this is the year, John, we are going to see Drake London become a bona fide number 1 superstar receiver. I think he is capable, number 1, from an athletic standpoint, but now he is a QB that can get him the rock. What are your thoughts, man?
Well, I mean, we saw flashes of Drake London last year, and we know he can do it. I mean, we saw some flashes, man. I mean, he was a guy you and I were very high on last year as well. We did a Would You Rather. We both wanted to have Drake London on our teams, and I did draft a Drake London, and there were a couple of games where it really worked out. The consistency wasn't there, and that was clearly quarterback play. Yeah, and obviously this year, there's a lot of hype on Drake London, and it's because of Kirk Cousins, and we've seen him support multiple receivers in the past, and they've got a bona fide number 1. I really like Drake London. Now, all of this is assuming that Kirk Cousins is healthy and is going to be back to action exactly the way he was. Luckily, not a mobile quarterback at all.
No.
So that's not bad. But, what effect is this going to have on his footwork? What effect is this going to have planting? Remains to be seen, But assuming all camp, reports everything looks good with Kirk Cousins, Drake London shoots way up my board. I think he's an absolute breakout candidate that could be a potential steal in the draft, in your fantasy football drafts. Now, what you were saying about Bijan, yeah, man. I mean, gold. I mean, this could be just craziness for Bijan. You're right. I mean, it's something that this is a player that has the skill sets of CMC and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
I mean, for real. So being able to see what he could do. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. And I know you're taking him pretty much at a ceiling. He's running back 2? Yeah. Running back 3, arguably. So you're paying for him. You're getting that as ceiling. But, we've seen those kind of running backs like a CMC, like a Saquon, like a Derrick Henry, where they just live up there. They got there immediately in that first round, and they've been there for almost a decade now,
And John, the other guy, too, that I wasn't even thinking about is Kyle Pitts, right? What a guy. You know what I mean? Like, this has been
when you were talking about TJ Hawkinson, I'm going, oh, Jesus Christ. Now I know where you're going with this. Yeah. Here we go with the Kyle Pitts talk. Are we really, what do we do? Let's stop. Let's be serious now.
Let's do it.
Okay. Quit it. What the fuck are we doing with Kyle Pitts? Okay. He's a guy nobody wants to draft because we've all fell in the pit of Kyle Pitts. Where it's just the most athletic, talented tight end that we've ever seen drafted, ever. And we just haven't seen it on the field. At all. I mean, not a startable fantasy asset. So now he's got a quarterback. Are we all going to fall for this again? What's going to happen?
I am. I'm jumping on board, John. If he's sitting there at 7 or 8 and I already have 2 established running backs, 3 established running backs, 3 established receivers, and Kyle Pitts is there, I'm definitely jumping on that board or that bandwagon and going for him, man. I think that what we've seen from Kirk Cousins and his ability to get the rock to Logan Thomas when he was there in Washington, when he was there for the Vikings with that of TJ Hawkinson, and even before Hawkinson, the tight ends there, Kirk Cousins has done a very good job So for me, man, not only is he going to get Kyle Pitts going in the right direction, not only is Arthur Smith's shitbag ass gone and going to be able to use Kyle Pitts in the correct ways, now they're saying Kyle Pitts is going to be running routes at receiver, splitting time at receiver with that of tight end. John, I'm jumping on the hype train, baby. I'm all about it. I'm ready to be miserable as fuck all year because I'm going to be drafting Kyle Pitts in the 7th or 8th round this year.
I mean, he's going right now. The ECR for him is tight end 7.
Yep.
You feel good about that? Do you think that's
Sure.
that's about where he should be? You think the risk is not as high because he's tight end 7?
I do. Because I mean,
Yeah.
we think about the mock drafts that we've done and honestly, the stats that we've seen, John, you're going to have to go for Sam Laporta and Kelsey early. They're off the board. So now you got third tight end there. It could be anywhere from George Kittle for those that really like Kittle. Could be anywhere from Trey McBride. It could be Mark Andrews, right? And then really, John, there's then this other group that's Evan Ingram. There's David Njoku. And then really, so Kyle Pitts kind of fits in the in-between. I think this is where you can actually get value for Kyle Pitts and not have to technically play the tight end game. And I know I sound like last year and the year before and all this fucking crazy shit. I'm with you. But I'm telling you, man, like this is, if Kirk Cousins is healthy, this, like to your point, let's caveat in the fact that he is healthy and ready to rock and roll.
Yes.
I'm ready to draft Kyle Pitts. If Kirk Cousins and everything is coming out that Michael Penix might be there, Michael Penix is a guy that's going to be taking the first few games or maybe, something like that, then you know what? No, I'm not going to be drafting Kyle Pitts. I'm going to go for another receiver, another running back at that point in time, and then playing the tight end carousel on the back end. But I just think I just got a little something in there, man, in my soul that's screaming, go get you some Kyle Pitts. Go get him.
Yeah. I think that's called gas, Frankie. That's what you're feeling in your soul right now. It's in your stomach. But
Probably.
the point is, you're right, though. It's not a huge risk. It's tight end 7, and it's also a tight end. You're not taking him in the first couple of rounds.
Right.
You're not anchoring your team with him. So if it doesn't pan out, don't fuck around. Stream tight end at that point. But, I mean, he did finish as a tight end 13. He finished outside of a starter last year. So
It's pretty bad.
I guess there's nowhere really to go but up. And with Kirk Cousins, he has to go up. He has to.
I mean, I'll tell you where Kirk Cousins is going to go. He's going to go shopping at Kohl's here pretty soon. That's where he's going to be going, John.
I hope he does buy some ice, man. I want to see him just draped with
Just
shit.
decked
I
out.
love it. Totally decked out. Totally decked out. All right, let's go to, all right, you know what, Frankie? We're going to do these next two guys together. This is a
Okay.
tandem, okay?
Lump them in.
This is, the quarterback situation now, which is what we're going to call it, the situation in Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah. Russell Wilson coming from Denver, which was a goddamn nightmare, to Pittsburgh. You've got Justin Fields coming from Chicago, which was definitely tumultuous. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Coming to Pittsburgh as well. They got Justin Fields for a pack of cigarettes, man. I mean, what a great deal that was. Why wouldn't you do that?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you do that? All right, let's start. We'll start with Russell Wilson, get into a few things, and then we'll talk about both of them together on this team and see what this looks like. But Russell Wilson, now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he is currently named the starter. This is July. That could change. We'll be watching this very closely, obviously. Last year, he finished as the QB 14 in Denver, currently the QB 30. So absolutely zero risk here. This is a guy you'll be potentially streaming if he breaks out, not a guy you're going to have to draft. Frankie, what are we thinking with Russell Wilson?
John, Russell Wilson is super, super interesting. I mean, for people, in my opinion, man, let's go back to last year. You mentioned he was QB 14, right? He was in a shit situation and he got benched because of contract issues and still finished QB 14. So I want to make sure we make that concrete as hell. He did not finish the season not because of him, because of the organization. And he still finished with over 3,000 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 341 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. John, what Russell Wilson did last year was a monumental turnaround from the year before. Okay, because that year in 2022 was awful. That was so bad. It was borderline embarrassing. So now you have Russell Wilson, John, going to the Steelers side with the guy we were just shit talking, Arthur Smith. And so here's Arthur Smith coming over to the Steelers. But the difference is, John, the Steelers ran by Mike Tomlin is a different beast. They have different players like that of George Pickens. They have Roman Wilson. They also have Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, a significantly better defense than he ever had on that of the Broncos. Even though the Broncos came along much better towards the end of the year last year, it wasn't even close. So for me, man, I think this is really, really interesting. Now, again, I'm not sitting here saying I'm going to draft him either. Like, I want to be also crystal clear. So when we start looking at, okay, comparing Russell Wilson, man, to that of Justin Fields, John, I don't know. They are very similar in a lot of ways and very different. You have Russell Wilson, who, former Super Bowl winner, right, has been to multiple Super Bowls, has done his work, was a beast at Seattle, borderline. We could make an argument for a borderline Hall of Fame career at Seattle. Absolutely dumpster dives in Denver. And then last year kind of made a comeback. But so then you look at Justin Fields, like I mentioned, dude, and you had a guy who terrible in his first year, got a little bit better in his second year. John, he's progressing at a good rate, but he had a terrible team around him. He didn't have Cortland Sutton. Yeah, he had DJ Moore, sure. But outside of that, John, I would take Denver's weapons last year over that of Chicago's any day of the week and twice on Sunday. I mean, you look at the running back situation, you look at the offensive line, you even look at, I mean, dude, dare I say at that point in time, the head coach even was Sean Payton versus Matt Eberflus. Like the entire thing, man, I think Justin Fields was working kind of like with an uphill battle already. And of course, as soon as he leaves, they get, right, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, bolster the defense, create this Arsenal team around Caleb Williams. And of course that would happen. So now you're looking at the competition between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Justin Fields is a younger, faster, hungry-ass dude that has a chip on his shoulder versus Russell Wilson, who's doing push-ups and jumping jacks on an airplane, who's been around the bus twice as much as that of Justin Fields. So it's going to be really interesting, man. And I'm excited to see how this actually pans out, dude.
Well, it's really interesting because, I mean, Russell Wilson right now is projected to be the starter. I don't anticipate that's going to change. I can very much see them. Obviously, Justin Fields is going to be an insurance policy. They saw what happened last year. Their quarterback situation was terrible. Pickett got hurt. They had to put in, was it Mason Rudolph ended up, I mean, just a bunch of shit, man. I mean, just garbage. It's such a good organization. They were like, give us some fucking good quarterbacks, please. Now they've got it. What'll be interesting, though, is that are they going to utilize Justin Fields on the field with Russell Wilson healthy? Are they going to could they do a little wildcat? Could they do a two quarterback situation using Justin Fields either as a decoy or an RPO type option? I love that. Russell Wilson's very good at that. Very, very good at that. So having both of those guys kind of peeling out to the right, it's kind of interesting, man. You know,
it's totally kind of interesting.
Yeah. And then you were talking about in the last episode, actually, about Roman Wilson.
Yeah.
And you were comparing him with Tyler Lockett. And you've got the George Pickens, which is very much the DK Metcalf type receiver. So I think it's a very similar just structure, similar archetypes of who he's throwing to. Good word, archetypes.
Oh, good word.
Yeah. But those type of receivers, Russell Wilson, I think it fits right into his strengths. So Russell Wilson could be interesting. No, it's not a guy I'm drafting.
No.
But in a two quarterback league,
definitely.
Super flex, absolutely. You go high on I can see myself right now drafting it in a super flex league, taking one of the stud quarterbacks and then just waiting and loading up on talent in between. And then one of my last picks taking Russell Wilson as my QB2. I think there will be enough there. I think he will be a serviceable enough quarterback to be a good QB2.
I agree.
He could be at the top of that list. There is a little bit of rushing floor there. There are great weapons around him. It's a great organization with a very strong running offense as well, running game. So, yeah, I think it's interesting, man. I mean, is Justin Fields would you even take a flyer on him in a super flex, even as a third quarterback or anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, as a third QB, absolutely. I think there's value there if something happens to Russell Wilson, if he's underperforming, if he gets hurt. We've seen John, I think there was and I'll have to do my due diligence on this, but I'm 99% sure that I read something that basically said in the last few years there's been more quarterback injuries than ever before. And what's interesting is that we've put their rules now in place to help the quarterbacks not get hurt as much, and they've been getting hurt more often. And so to that point, absolutely, man, Justin Fields could certainly be a guy that you look to just hold on to, see what happens. And I love your call out in regards to the Wildcat. I think it would be negligent if the Steelers didn't do that. You look at examples that this has worked. The Saints is a prime example of this with Taysom Hill, with that of Derek Carr. It's worked. You even look at the Browns, dumbing it way down. I'm not comparing Dorian Thompson-Robinson to that of Justin Fields. Justin Fields is certainly a better football player at this point in time than DTR is, but the premise applies. What I mean by this is when Deshaun was in, or at that point in time when Flacco was in before DTR got hurt, right? Flacco was the guy in the pocket, and then they would bring DTR in for goal line to totally be a wildcat type of player that can also throw. And so, John, I think that there could certainly be value with Justin Fields. And again, people are dogging this cat like Justin Fields wasn't that good. For me, man, Justin Fields was decent. He had 2,500 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 657 rushing yards last year with 4 rushing touchdowns. John, there's something there. That's not nothing there, right? And so that's why I think that was an awesome call, because that could certainly be the way that this pans out. Maybe it's goal line packages. Maybe it's 3rd and short, 4th and short packages to where, oh shit, here's a guy that we've seen throw the ball, sparingly very well, but also seen the dude run the ball even better. Look out. Like, they could look to implement some sort of wildcat. I love it.
One thing this does, even though I'm not super excited about drafting either of these guys, one thing it does, it makes me feel very excited about George Pickens.
Yes.
It makes me feel safe to draft Roman Wilson as a flyer rookie receiver. It makes me feel safe taking Pat Freiermuth, knowing that I don't have to draft him. I can punt on tight end, take Firemouth, and feel really good about it. I mean, that's what the fantasy implications really for Russell Wilson are to me. It makes me feel very good about the receiving options in Pittsburgh, which I haven't felt in a very long time. Let's get to Gardner Minshew. All right. Gardner Minshew, storied career with the Colts. He's on the Las Vegas Raiders. Gardner Minshew, the guy that looks like he stole a carburetor out of your car. Or he takes copper piping out of houses on the weekends,
Just the occasional, just quick copper piping.
To be funny, I might have to keep a picture up here, show a picture of Gardner Minshew. I actually joke, Frankie, and say that he looks like a dirtball Frankie. He looks like a dirtball version of you. If you had like a mullet going on and a little stash, shave everything else but the stash, I think you're Gardner Minshew, man. Yeah.
I mean, I can embody that Gardner Minshew too. Like, I could totally live the van life. I could totally go out there and figure it out. Like, yeah, man, I can get behind that, John. A little bit of Halloween.
Get a van
costume
with the windows blacked out. Get yourself a rape van, drive around Vegas.
Drive around Vegas on the strip, just driving in my white van with my locks coming out. My locks.
That's right. All right, so Gardner Minshew now with Vegas. He is competing with Aiden O'Connell, who was, it's his second year. He was a rookie last year, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So he's competing with Aiden O'Connell right now for the starting job. But we know the guy can play. I mean, the guy can play quarterback. He can put up fantasy. He can support receivers. Last year, he finished as a QB 21, came in with the Colts, backing up Anthony Richardson when he went down. Currently, he's the 33rd quarterback off the board. It's a guy you don't have to draft, but again, it is a guy that you want to look at. If he is the starter, could be an excellent streamer if you're streaming quarterbacks in the right format, right matchup. Could also be a decent option for a superflex. I would not shy away from him in a superflex if he's the starter because of one guy, and that's Devontae Adams. All right, so Frankie, talk to us about Gardner Minshew. Where is he? Dirtbag Frankie. How's he looking this year?
Dirtbag Frankie's looking solid this year, man. When we look at, first off, what he was able to do for the Colts, John, this is a guy that stepped in when A-Rich got hurt and literally should have led his team to a playoff berth. It was a dropped, for those that remember, it was a dropped catch, or pass, should I say, from a backup running, literally 2 backups running back against that of the Houston Texans. It was like 4th and 2 and he dropped it. Should have been the Colts going to the playoffs. With that being said, what does that mean? John, from a stats perspective, man, 3,300 yards last year, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. That is extremely efficient for a guy that honestly has been known to like throw the ball a little bit around. But here's what's even more interesting when we start looking at stats. When we compare what Gardner Minshew has done to that of Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence in 3 years as a starter versus that of Gardner Minshew in 2 years as a starter. Gardner Minshew has 59 touchdown passes compared to Trevor Lawrence's 58. He has 24 interceptions compared to that of Trevor Lawrence's 39. He has a passer rating of a 90.2 compared to 85. And what does that mean? Trevor Lawrence also has many, many more pass attempts. So we have to keep that, into perspective. But when you look at the games, Gardner Minshew played 49 games versus that of Trevor Lawrence's 50. So when we start breaking this down a bit further, and you look at the guy that is now tied for the highest paid quarterback in the NFL in Trevor Lawrence, and looking what Gardner Minshew has done, dude, I'm about Minshew mania here, man. Like Dirtbag Frankie's coming out to play. Okay, so when you compare that then to Aiden O'Connell, John, yeah, they're very similar. Aiden O'Connell was not a complete shit stain last year, like by any means. Like he was a rookie. He had rookie things, but what he did at Purdue, he was very good coming into the NFL. And so I think Gardner Minshew, this is actually, in my personal opinion, man, this is his job to lose. They signed him to a 2-year, $25 million deal, $15 million guaranteed. In Gardner Minshew's eyes, he got paid. He got paid decent for what he's going to be able to do. Then you hit the nail on the head. Look at what he has around him. Well, last year for the Colts, he had Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and Jonathan Taylor. Very good. Again, should have led that team to a playoff. But now every position outside of Jonathan Taylor is better. Every single one. You have Devontae Adams and Michael Pittman Jr. I'm taking Devontae. Okay, you have Josh Downs versus that of Jacoby Myers. I'm taking Jacoby Myers. And then you have that of Trey Tucker. Now you have that of our boy Brock Bowers, right? The tight end there, who they really went after at the 13th overall pick. And by the way, quick pause on that. Shout out to you guys for keeping me honest in some of the comments. Keep that shit coming. I ended up saying that he was top 10. You guys called me out and said he was 13th. I appreciate that shit. Keep it coming. Love the engagement. Keep commenting and call me out on my bullshit, right? But with that being said.
And you know what? Also,
ahead,
I want to step into.
Yeah.
Call him names. He loves that.
Call
him names. I want to see Frankie just abused and brutalized on YouTube, guys. The comments can get
Sick.
super brutal.
Sick.
I had to tell
Trying to
Frankie.
be hyper.
You have to do the Joe Rogan, man. You got to post and ghost. But you know what? It's a fantasy football podcast. We like to engage. We like to answer questions. Keep them coming. But yeah, destroy Frankie, please.
Good.
Just absolutely
Good.
destroy him.
Keep me checked, right? I love it. Appreciate you guys engaging. So back to this, man. So with that being said, I love the situation that Gardner Minshew is in, as well as Aiden O'Connell. John, I love what you said as well. This is absolutely a guy, without a question of a doubt, that I think is somebody in a 2-quarterback league you pick up as your 3rd quarterback. Number 1, somebody goes down, somebody gets hurt, he's trade bait. Number 2, bye-week insurance. Number 3, if your player gets hurt and you know that Gardner Minshew can come in and immediately step in and get you some fantasy relevant points, guys, it's going to be worth it. So, John, I do like Gardner Minshew this year. Level setting expectation. I'm not saying he's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but I'm saying he could be very, very interesting, not only from an NFL perspective, but from your fantasy team too.
What does that do? I mean, of these 2 quarterbacks, who would you rather have as the starter with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell? If you're looking at drafting Devontae Adams, which I know you are, love him.
Love him.
Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers. You know, who would you rather have in that position?
John, for me, it's not a question. I'm going Gardner Minshew. I'm going a guy that's tried, true, and proven.
Agreed.
What I mean by that is, guys, he played well when he got the opportunity at Jacksonville. He played well when he got the opportunity for the Colts. Again, I'm not saying he's blowing up everything. I'm saying that he played good enough to be a starting NFL caliber player. And so for me, man, I think that will elevate what we saw from Devontae last year. Guys, this is why, in my opinion, Devontae is being slept on this year. Devontae is still a top-tier receiver. Not my words, also his words in the most recent podcast that he just did, right? Stack ranked himself 1, Justin Jefferson 2. And I don't think that that's that terribly far off from the truth. I do think CeeDee Lamb is up there, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, etc. But I definitely think that in fantasy world, Devontae Adams should be a back half first round pick, especially now with what we're going to be able to see from the lift that Gardner Minshew could provide in comparison to what Aiden O'Connell and others have done in prior years.
If Gardner Minshew is the starter, Devontae Adams is in that conversation for me on the turn.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, and that
If
is
I'm-
what I was referring to. Yes.
If I'm on the
John.
turn in the first to second round turn,
Mhm.
if Devontae Adams is sitting there, I'm very, very high on taking two receivers and having Devontae as my two. I love that. It's
John,
beautiful.
one quick question for you. Would you rather have, so thinking about where you talked about the ADP or the ECR, right? So Gardner Minshew's 33rd. When you look at Justin Fields' 27th on the board and that of Russell Wilson's, which is 30th on the board from an ECR perspective, who would you draft if you were looking at a 2-quarterback league, Superflex, between those three? Which one would you be taking for either your second or your third quarterback option?
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. I mean, the first thing I would say was probably Russell Wilson. I think it's just a much better team. I think he's got better weapons around him, but we know what the Pittsburgh Steelers are. Even with a good quarterback, it's not likely they're going to be putting up really gaudy numbers. I mean, it's a run-first team,
Definitely.
run the ball, play defense. Russell Wilson is a very good game manager as well. So that does give me hesitation. It could be Gardner Minshew, because you've got Devontae Adams and he's going to eat. That son of a bitch is going to eat. So it might be Dirtbag Frankie for me in that situation, man. I really do. I would not be shocked if he's named the starter. He looks great and he's got a great connection with Devontae. Yeah, I feel totally good about that. Okay, Frankie, let's talk a little bit about Sam Darnold now.
Oh, Darnie.
Sam Darnold, man, actually played well when he came in for Brock Purdy last year with San Francisco 49ers. Now, take into consideration, that's Kyle Shanahan, okay? Kyle Shanahan is the quarterback whisperer if I've ever seen one in my life. So, Sam Darnold now in Minnesota, replacing Kirk Cousins, who we just talked about. He is listed as the starter right now. They drafted J.J. McCarthy. We'll see what happens there. But we saw Sam Darnold be very serviceable in San Francisco. He finished as the QB 58. Again, he was the backup, came in for a couple of games. Right now, quarterback 34. Again, not a guy you're drafting, but a guy you should be aware of and aware of the situation. Minnesota's very different than San Francisco. Frankie,
Totally.
What does Sam Darnold's outlook look like if he starts the season as the starter?
John, if he starts the season as the starter, it's a decent outlook. I'm not going to sit here and lie that it's not. And I say that because of the talent around him, right? When we were talking about the rookie review with J.J. McCarthy, that's why we put him as one of the quarterbacks that were kind of interesting because of Justin Jefferson, because of Jordan Addison, because of that of T.J. Hawkinson and Aaron Jones and the bolstered defense front that they now have, or defense in general that actually got better. So, John, for me, man, I mean, Sam Darnold is one of those guys, right? He's either seeing ghosts as he's throwing the ball, as what we saw for the Jets, or he's a good backup. And so I think that's where he's going to live, and I think that's where he can make a decent living. He'll be a Blake Bortles type of guy. And so I think that for me, man, if he ends up starting, I personally am not going to be drafting him, John. Currently, as you mentioned, he's the 34th quarterback off the board. I just don't see it. And to your point, the game that he did get the opportunity, he did get 19 points, right? He had, in fantasy points, he had 297 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, right? A couple rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, all sorts of exciting things from that side of things. But again, I don't see it past anything more than that, especially when they're playing in the division like that of the Packers, with that of the Bears, with that are going to have a very much improved defense. And then you also have, right, the big mammoth elephant in the room, which is that of the Lions. So for me, I'm staying away from Darnie. Enjoy the ride while it is and get ready for J.J. McCarthy.
Here's the real question, though. I don't think anybody gives a fuck about Sam Darnold. I really don't. People might be excited about J.J. McCarthy to see what he can do, but the real question is, what we do give a fuck about is Justin Jefferson.
Totally.
Because he's in that conversation of those top 5 receivers that are going in the top 5 picks, 4 picks. I'm sorry, but in my mind, because of Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson's at the back of that tier. He's on the
100%.
bottom of that tier for me, and it's not even close. I can argue for Tyreek, CD, Jamar Chase, all being together, basically flip a coin, give me one of them, don't care. But Justin Jefferson's he's the back of that tier for me because of the quarterback play.
John, do you think, and I completely agree. I couldn't agree more with you. I think that is going to be somebody, I think this is going to hamstring his ability to really take off from a fantasy perspective. I could see a slightly better version of what Devontae Adams did last year, and that could be JJ's ceiling. That's just the reality of the situation based on the quarterback play at hand. But one thing that I do have, so let's go down this path from drafting. Could you make an argument to say, hey, I'm going to go more with an A.J. Brown or an Amon-Ra St. Brown, right, than that of a Justin Jefferson, even though the talent technically for Justin Jefferson is better. It just is. I don't think that's debatable. Even though A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra are incredible talent, JJ's just different a little bit. But could you make a case for drafting A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra over that of Justin Jefferson, what does that make that? That puts Justin Jefferson at pick 8, because assuming that Bijan goes before, or Breece Hall, or 9 at that point, and now you're sitting there at 9 overall or 8 overall, and now Justin Jefferson could be on the board. Is that an automatic, fire it up at 8 with Justin Jefferson, or do you even have to mull that over even further?
It's almost, that is a tough decision when you're looking at Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, or Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I'm going to go Amon-Ra, personally.
I don't hate that. Yeah, and you're 100% right. It's quarterback play. I mean, that's the difference with all of these receivers. I would not fault anyone. I do think Justin Jefferson, I think he's just a tad above. He's like a half step above, below the top 4.
Sure.
And just a half step above those 2.
Totally
I think,
agree.
in my mind. Just a half step. But I would not argue with anyone if they decided to take Amon-Ra or A.J. Brown over Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson could be drafted back-to-back. Prediction for next year, he could be drafted back-to-back with Devontae Adams. They could have almost identical seasons. It's very possible. Yeah. Now, the other question is Jordan Addison. He's kind of almost off my board at this point, to be perfectly honest with you. If I can get him at a good discount, I'll take a shot on him, and knowing that I'm going to have to sit on him a little while and probably wait until there's a J.J. McCarthy, unseating of Sam Darnold there. But it makes it a lot more difficult for me to draft Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson goes down my board a tad, but I think he'll still have tons of value. I think Sam Darnold will do a lot of checkdowns.
You're saying he goes down in terms of you're going to wait till later? You think he's going to be less valuable? I just want to confirm that. Because I actually think the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. I'm in the opposite camp, man, because I think with the way Sam Darnold operates and the way J.J. McCarthy operates, J.J. McCarthy's top throws weren't deep threats. They were out to the corners or even that of mesh routes for that of Roman Wilson and a few others, maybe even Donovan Edwards from Michigan, who would break out and run a flare or a flaring up or something along those lines, or a corner route, or whatever it may be, a Chicago route. And so for me, I actually think this bolsters TJ Hawkinson, assuming TJ Hawkinson is back healthy from his injury, his ACL tear, so on and so forth. But that's interesting. And here's another point, man. What about Aaron Jones? For me, I actually think this drives up Aaron Jones, John. I think that Aaron Jones could be spectacular this year because you're not going to be able to fully stack the box. Even though you might have a shitty quarterback situation, you absolutely cannot leave Justin Jefferson one-on-one. You can't do it. You absolutely can't do it because even if you throw him a 50-50 ball, 50% of the time he's coming down with it. That's how good he is. And so that still opens up the door for Aaron Jones. And so for me, man, I'm licking my chops if I'm seeing Aaron Jones in the 3rd round there, and I'm picking him immediately.
I'm high on Aaron Jones. Yeah. And it's also because of his pass catching ability.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think he's going to be an outlet guy for 2 quarterbacks who do not throw the ball deep down the field very often. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Jacoby Brissett. Little beef brisket action going on here. Yeah. He's now with New England, listed as the starter, but they did draft Drake May. So we've got another quarterback controversy here. There's a lot of quarterback rooms we're going to be paying attention to in camp this year, man. Finished quarterback 57. He was a backup quarterback last year. Currently going in that same range of backup quarterbacks, around 36 quarterback off the board. All right, Frankie, talk about Jacoby Brissett. What are we going to do with him? What effect does he have, if any, on these players on the New England Patriots?
John, first and foremost, guys, I want to make it clear. I love Jacoby Brissett. I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole right now. It's just not a guy that I think that, right? I would rather take Gardner Minshew if he's the starter over Jacoby Brissett as the starter, right? And it's just the pieces that are around him. It's not just him alone as a player. We've seen Jacoby Brissett play well, right? When he was at the Colts, he wasn't a complete, terrible player by any means. And even when he was at the Browns, right? The Browns, he had a winning record with the Browns when he was leading the chart. Very good, very serviceable quarterback. So I just want to pump the brakes at this is not a malicious attack on Jacoby Brissett. It's strictly the fact that the Patriots suck and they're really bad. John, they're drafted Jalen Polk from Washington that I think is going to be decent. They still have Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Javon Baker, who I think is very interesting rookie, which we didn't talk about much, John, but because there's so many other dynamic receiver rookies right now, that he's kind of lost the sauce from UCF. And so I think that he could be an interesting piece. Obviously, they still have Ramondre Stevenson. They have Antonio Gibson they just signed. And so, but again, none of this makes me that excited, if I'm being completely honest with you. And so for me, man, I think that Jacoby Brissett is just going to be one of those guys that you can sit there in a 2-quarterback league. You draft him as your 3rd quarterback, see what happens. Maybe draft Drake May, see what happens. It's not a guy that I'm really going to get excited about, nor do I really think it's going to change whether it's Drake May to Jacoby Brissett, the output necessarily of the other guys that I mentioned. I think that, Ramondre Stevenson, I think is going to be pretty similar to what we've seen over the last few years. I think with Zeke leaving, there's some vacated targets. Actually, Zeke was the Patriots' leading receiver last year, which is insane to even think about. And he's gone, right? So now, they bring in Antonio Gibson, who's certainly a James White carbon copy there. But I mean, that doesn't help Ramondre Stevenson. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. So this whole entire Patriots team, John, for me, is just kind of gross in terms of fantasy, and I'm not really here for it. So I love Jacoby Brissett. I think Drake May is going to be interesting. But for me, man, I want to table expectations, look elsewhere at this point, unless you want to draft him as your QB3.
In a standard 12-team league without some crazy rules in it or without a real deep bench or anything, Frankie, the Patriots are a team I'm just not drafting anybody.
All of them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there isn't anybody on this team that I even want to draft. So let's move on. All right, a couple of guys we just want to mention here. A couple of backups to be aware of. We saw last year what happened. It was a goddamn nightmare with quarterbacks. A lot of them went down, and a lot of second backup quarterbacks had to step up, and it really affected things in fantasy football. Not just the quarterback, every receiver on the team, even the running backs. All right, we're going to touch on a few guys here and just pick out any pieces that might be fantasy relevant for you. Sam Howell, now on the Seahawks. He's backing up Jonnu Smith. Sam Howell actually finished the QB 16 last year. I mean, he's a serviceable quarterback, man. I mean, he's very much like a kind of a Joe Flacco type quarterback. He just loves to air the ball out. A lot of picks, a lot of touchdowns, though, as well. So 21 touchdowns, 21 picks. Okay, a little 50-50 balls there. Sam Howell, if he does play, would it be somebody, are you looking at maybe a streamer based on matchup? I mean, is there any fantasy relevance here if Sam Howell ends up playing instead of Jonnu Smith?
Yeah, I think so, John. But I think it's only if Jonnu Smith is benched, hurt, anything along those lines. Sam Howell's not a guy that's going to be drafted. I mean, sure, he threw for almost 4,000 yards last year. Very Jameis Winston-esque with 21 touchdowns, 21 interceptions there. So, yeah, John, I think that, Sam Howell I think it's a brilliant move, by the way, for Seattle. As great insurance for that. It's much better than that of Drew Lock, in my personal opinion. But yeah, man, I think other than that, I think we just kind of wait and see how the Seattle offense kind of looks with Jonnu Smith. And I think, that will kind of take us from there.
Okay, Joe Flacco. Another guy on the move here, man. He was our hero in Cleveland last year. Wacko for fucking Flacco. All right, Joe Flacco. Now listen, he's on a team. This is a guy that we could see a remake of last year. He was on the Browns last year as a backup, and just an absolute inspired finish to the season for Joe Flacco. Just truly incredible what he did, just coming off the couch, man. Now he's on the Colts, backing up Anthony Richardson, who we've only seen him play a little bit. I mean, this is a guy absolutely at risk of being injured again. Joe Flacco, I think of almost all of the backups in the league, he's the most likely to get on the field in my mind. Finished quarterback 28 last year. It doesn't really matter. Only played, a portion of the season. Frankie, Joe Flacco, if he gets on the field, what are we looking at here?
John, Joe Flacco is certainly worth at least being rostered if Anthony Richardson goes down. I mean, what he did last year, guys, he had 129 fantasy points in 5 games. That's a lot. Okay, he had 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and he led the Browns to a playoff and a team that should not have been in the playoffs outside of our defense. So, yeah, John, I think that he also has great weapons around him, right? We talked about MPJ and Adonai Mitchell and Josh Downs and Jelani Woods and JT. I mean, but I think until Anthony, and by the way, you're also not drafting or even picking up Joe Flacco in hopes that Anthony Richardson, you're not wasting a bench spot either. That's, I want to make sure I'm crystal clear. So it truly is like same thing. I would put him in the camp of Sam Howell, John. If one of these guys, Jonnu Smith gets hurt or benched, Anthony Richardson gets hurt or benched, this is where you're spending your fab dollars. This is where you're spending 50%, 30%, 40% of your fab dollars because it could be game changing for you or a tradable asset. So that's the key call from a fantasy perspective. Not so much like, hey, am I going to draft this guy, pick, whatever it may be. It's strictly, okay, if that happens, how do I get him and what does that mean for my team? So yeah, John, I think very similar aspect to Sam Howell.
All right, so we're going to run through a couple of backup quarterbacks here. Just want everybody to be aware where these guys are because there was just so much movement this year with the quarterbacks, backups especially. Drew Lock now backing up Danny Dimes, which you now call Danny Nichols.
Danny Nichols.
He's got to throw some dimes before you give him that credit, right?
Right.
We got Jameis Winston backing up Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. We've got Tyrod Taylor at the Jets. Marcus Mariota at Washington. Mitch the Bitch Trubisky in Buffalo backing up Josh Allen. Jimmy G backing up
Stafford.
Matt Stafford at the Rams. Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. That could be a guy that gets some playing time. I think Matthew Stafford's been having a harder and harder time every year staying on the field after that Super Bowl win. We've got Carson Wentz backing up Pat Mahomes at Kansas City. Mason Rudolph, God, I hate that guy so bad. He's at Tennessee. And we got Josh Dobbs in San Francisco. Okay, Frankie, let's touch quickly. Couple of tight ends. There's not a lot here that really have much fantasy value, but we want to just touch on a couple of guys here because I think that they may. We're looking at first guy here, first tight end, new face, new place. Jonnu Smith, now with the Miami Dolphins, currently is looking like he is going to be the starter. What are we thinking about Jonnu Smith right now?
Jonnu Smith, he got paid 2-year, $8.4 million, 3.9 guaranteed. What that means, guys listening, is that he is walking in as the starter for that of the Miami Dolphins. Now, again, they have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, right? They have Raheem Mostert. They signed OBJ, which we're going to talk about in our next episode coming up. But yeah, John, for me, this is a guy that, right, he had 70 targets last year. You're not seeing that on this team. He had 50 receptions last year. I don't think he's going to even come close to that, right? He had 582 yards, 3 touchdowns, finished tight end, as you mentioned, 16. I don't see that happening on this particular team just because there's so many mouths to feed, right? And so for me, man, I think that this is a guy that you don't even draft. Wait to see if he ends up, kind of spiking up a bit here and there. Injuries occur to your tight end. He's certainly worth a pickup at that point in time, but temper expectations, go elsewhere at this moment.
All right, and speaking of the guy he replaced in Miami, is now in Cincinnati, projected to be the starting tight end for Cincinnati Bengals, Mike Gesicki. Very interesting, man. What are you thinking about Mike Gesicki? We've seen some tight end value in fantasy coming out of the Bengals here. Could Mike Gesicki be like that?
Yes. The answer is yes, John. Even though Jonnu Smith technically has performed light years better than Gesicki has, the team that Gesicki has landed on is in desperate need of tight end help, right? They had Drew Sample, they had Hayden Hurst, or they still have Drew Sample. They had Hayden Hurst for a little while. That didn't really work out very well. A few others they haven't found, right? They had CJ Uzama for a minute. And that was kind of the best that they had for a while, man. So for me, I think Mike Gesicki's in a really good situation, right? They have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins signed his franchise tag, Zach Moss, Chase Brown, with what you mentioned. Outside of that, Tyler Boyd's gone. They've nobody else really to be throwing the ball to. So for me, man, when we look at Mike Gesicki having 45 targets, 29 receptions last year, only 240 yards pretty much and 2 touchdowns, dude, I see this being the stat line, what Jonnu Smith's stat line was potentially for that of Mike Gesicki, as long as Burrow stays healthy. So keep Mike Gesicki on your radar, guys. I'm not saying draft him. That's not what I'm saying. But
Streamer.
yes, stream quality, absolutely, man. No question about it.
Okay, let's touch on a few guys to make everyone aware of here. Colby Parkinson is now with the Los Angeles Rams. Tight end Will Dissly is with the Chargers. Charlie Werner with the Falcons. Gerald Everett is with the Bears. And Austin Hooper making an appearance in the shitstorm of New England. All right, guys, that is the New Faces, New Places, Part 1. I know it's not the most exciting one. It's QBs, tight ends. I get it. We wanted to give you guys a little tease, but man, I'm telling you, stay tuned because the running backs alone are bananas. It's probably going to have to at least be 2 episodes. There's so many. Running backs, receivers coming up next, guys. Few episodes in a row. So excited for that. Frankie, if someone were to go on social media, where would they find you?
Oh my goodness, I'm so happy you asked, John. Guys, check us out, right? Love us on YouTube. Subscribe.
Wait, is there a love
that
button?
We're going to make
I didn't know that
one
was
if
an
there's
option.
not. Fuck it. Let's create one, right? Screw it.
Let's create a love button.
Guys, check us out on YouTube. We really appreciate the support. We are growing the channel like crazy. Love the engagement. If you want to talk a little bit of shit, talk a little bit of shit. Right? You want to check Frankie a little bit? Check Frankie a little bit. You might get smacked around on the backside. That's okay. We're here for the fun, right? We want to make this as fun as possible while delivering you guys top quality content. We'll see you next week. We love you guys. Tune in, subscribe, like. We love you.
And keep bringing the heat on Frankie on YouTube comments. Come on, I love it. All right. May the fantasy gods smile upon you. Bye.